It is such a joy to be with you this morning. This is my fourth time visiting the congregation since I began working with the UUA in the Pacific Western region, and my third time in worship. My first time in worship, I was just attending worship, and was there to talk to the congregation in a forum afterward about what if Susan Frederick Gray won the election and became the president of the UUA? What would we do? That also happened to be the Sunday after the 2016 election. My heart was heavy, and it felt so good to be with you and be nourished by the worship at Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix that Sunday. It introduced me immediately to the power and the depth and the joy that is this congregation. So let's go back to that week, actually. Earlier that week, on Election Day, I was just too full of distraction to work. So I took a day off of the UUA, and I decided I was going to plant a garden. We had just moved into the condo that we live in now, and I wanted to just take control of something, anything, and beautify that little plot of earth behind the condo. I was feeling distressed about our culture, our nation. I was feeling despair about climate change. I didn't know how this election was going to turn out, but I would focus my energy on making my backyard not just beautiful, but an expression of my spiritual values. Now, this is a small backyard. It's about the size of a typical middle-class living room, and most of the backyard's taken up by patio. So I did not have a heck of a lot of soil to work with, but I plodded ahead anyway. First, I brought out the beauty that was already there by weeding and fertilizing the roses that were planted and the like. And then I purchased native plants. So they're so threatened in our area because new houses, just like here in San Diego, there's new houses being built all the time, taking away native habitat. I bought a house for solitary bees. I planted flowers that the bees would like, and with great expectancy, I bought some milkweed, envisioning generations of monarch butterflies birthed at our home. All was going well until I brought in the vegetables. First, it was the demise of the spinach, taken down by mites, and then it was the kale, devoured by aphids. I started to apply organic pesticides, but then I realized that I couldn't even apply those because they'd hurt the butterfly larvae. So I bought some ladybugs to eat the insects off of the veggies, but then they all flew away or died. I planted new kale and spinach, but then I noticed that something else was eating them. Birds. So I built this whole ugly contraption to scare away the birds from the garden with like CDs rotating in the air and stuff. But then this garden wasn't pretty anymore. Then one day workers came to fix the patio and a nest of 5 rats ran out from underneath. Oh my, I guess I caught the veggie eaters. Did I mention that we're vegan? Now, my family, we're vegans with a rat problem. I was already feeling like this little yard was putting my values at cross purposes. And then we got a dog who loves to dig and lie in dirt. She's trampled the carefully nurtured native plants as well as the kale and the onions. She's come very close to squishing some precious monarchs. So this yard, this expression of my spiritual values, became an illustration of the interdependent web, but not just in a pretty way. It became a system at war with itself. Have you experienced something like that in home or in life or here at church? Feeling that despite your best efforts at trying to change things, to express your values, to flower beautifully, that things are just not quite working out as you planned. Feeling like you're working with forces that are beyond your control, or even the sum of the parts and what they can control. It's a system. We Unitarian Universalists talk a lot about systems, about the justice system, the economic system, the systems out there, the solar systems. I saw someone in a really cool solar system shirt today. There we go. And our systems that are in here are digestive systems, and the social systems that we're caught up in. And unless you believe in an all-powerful God, you've probably come to recognize that no one thing is in charge of a system. A system is really a community. It's a complex community of beings, each having its own behaviors and its own purposes. And like my backyard, the results of the system say more about it in many ways than the values or the intentions that went into it. It's not just the thought that counts. I'm on the congregational life staff of the Unitarian Universalist Association, which means that Susan Frederick Gray is my boss's boss's boss. But it also means that I support the living systems of the congregations here in the Pacific Western region, partnering with you to tend to the health of your congregation's system. And our congregations, like my backyard, can find ourselves all tangled up as we try to express our values. We can face conundrums like we value radical inclusion, but we also value kindness and good boundaries. So what does it mean to be radically inclusive of someone whose behavior is hurtful or inappropriate for our community? Those values can come into conflict in the life of a congregation. Or there are times when we try to clean up our system, like we get all of our policies, our procedures, our practices, the ways we do church in order, nice little binders, have it all printed out, and then we find that nobody actually reads the binders, and the loosey-goosiness persists. Or sometimes a congregation's bylaws might say who's really in charge here, the board and the minister, but everybody knows it's really Sally and Joe who are in charge. In a complex human system like a congregation, there are so many layers upon layers of values and meaning and culture and the way things have always been done that it can feel pretty hard to change things. Even if you're Johnny the congregational president, even if you're Christine the minister, who has the most authority to make change, it can be hard to make that change because a living system is naturally resistant to change. So the whole system needs to be taken into account if we're going to transform the congregation, or our backyard, or the world. This is a very, very challenging time to be a person in the United States. I was going to say progressive religious person, or I was going to say person who's targeted by persecution, but it's just hard to be a person in the United States right now, period. There is so much anxiety and fear and hatred. There's so much violence and so much othering, and it tears at our hearts. It's hard to know how to respond when every day there's another thing to be outraged about, another example of cruelty or autocracy, and more. This is not what we are supposed to be like. Not how we were supposed to be as a country or as a world if we followed our ideals. We are Unitarian Universalists because we believe in the human capacity for goodness, and yet there is so much evil. But at the same time, something else is emerging. There is a new sense of our power as people, and there are several deeply interconnected, creative, and wise movements of people working together not only to challenge the evil, but to make love win. We've seen it in Black Lives Matter. We've seen it at Standing Rock. We've seen it in Parkland, Florida. We've seen it with Families Belong Together, and we've seen it so powerfully in the climate strike all around the world the last 2 weeks. Movements rising up as if from nowhere, catching hold and changing the course of history. This is an emergence of love-based activism. And it can surprise us. Why at this time? Why those people? Like, there had been so many school shootings. Why at Parkland, Florida, did it suddenly take hold with the youth leading us? This is the heart of what I want to share with you today. Beauty and power emerge in unexpected places when we have been tending to our living systems, when we've been planting the seeds and nurturing the roots. None of these movements truly sprung up from nowhere. They had strong interconnections with seeds planted by those who came before. They emerged because people had been tending the living system. The early 20th century activist minister Howard Thurman counseled us in the reading this morning to look well to the growing edge. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. Howard Thurman didn't say this lightly. He grew up in the early 20th century as a Black person in the segregated South, where he witnessed everyday legalized terror targeted against him and his people. Just a generation before, his family was enslaved and children were separated from their parents routinely. But his family, his community, his church, the spirituals they sang, and the Bible they read taught him something else too. His faith called him in the midst of the suffering and the horror of everyday life to look deeply at what was emerging. That growing edge where those life-giving possibilities exist at every moment. He did most of his work and his ministry in a time when there was no certainty at all that legal segregation would end. There was no proof that nonviolence could change the world. There was but all the while he was planting the seeds and nurturing the shoots, looking at the life-giving possibilities for equality and freedom. Without knowing it, he built relationships and made connections in the 1950s that blossomed into the unstoppable civil rights movement. Where is the growing edge in our living system? In this living system here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix, where is that growing edge? What shoots are rising here? What roots are spreading underground? You have called a wonderful new minister, Reverend Christine Dance, and you called her because of the promise that she brings and the skills and the spiritual leadership that she embodies. But who you and she will be together, that is something that cannot be exactly predicted. It is something that will emerge, and it'll emerge from looking together toward that growing edge. The congregation's previous settled minister, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, was a classmate of mine, and I knew her when she came here. She and I talked about our congregations, and I know from her story and from yours that her outstanding social justice leadership emerged from her relationship with you and with the greater Phoenix community. She didn't come here as the minister who would take on O.R. Pio. And she didn't come here as the minister who would be a leader in the fight against SB 1070. All those things emerged because of what was happening here, what this congregation was, what the community was calling you to, and that particular combination, that web of interdependence made that emerge. So what will emerge out of the relationship with Reverend Christine and your community? That remains to be seen, but it's very exciting. You are now together in a living system with so many interrelated parts. And what you can do now is to open yourself to that growing edge, to try not to replicate the past, but to intentionally make way for emergence. Our together time this morning drew from the contemporary activist Adrienne Marie Brown and her book, Emergent Strategy. And she sees emergence as the key strategy for how we change the systems of our lives to be more loving and more just. So she says, emergence is beyond what the sum of its parts could even imagine. That oak trees, they don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Under the earth, always they reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined, and they create a system of strength that is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. And dandelions don't know whether they are a weed or a brilliance, but each seed can create a field of dandelions. We are invited to be that prolific, to return fertility to the soil around us. And what emerges from these cycles are complex organisms, systems, movements, societies. In this view, nothing is wasted or a failure. Emergence is part of a system that makes use of everything. How are we reaching for each other? How are we reaching each other? And what might emerge when we build those relationships and those connections? What might emerge when we wake up to the ancestry DNA results that just came in for all of us? That we are each deeply interdependent, deeply indebted to all people and all life. Realizing that we are related to and in relationship with everyone and everything, and feeling awe and wonder and responsibility and love for this tremendous experience of life that we share. Love for one another, love for those who are different from us, love for the creatures, the microorganisms, the earth. Resisting with all of our might those forces that tell us we're separate or that they are other. The systems thinker Donella Meadows tells us, the future can't be predicted, but it can be envisioned and brought lovingly into being. We can't surge forward with certainty into a world of no surprises, but we can expect surprises and learn from them and even profit from them. We can't impose our will on a system. We can listen to what the system tells us and discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than could ever be produced by our will alone. We can't control systems or figure them out, but we can dance with them. And here you can dance with each other and with your new dance partner, the Reverend Christine Dance. And together, how might you listen and discover and bring into being something better and more beautiful than any of us alone could have imagined? My backyard garden is still in the process of becoming. As a player in its system, I'm watching and learning from it. There was a time when I thought I had made a perfect haven for pollinators, but then came grasshoppers and powdery mildew. I'm always having to adjust and rebalance and pay attention to how the system is changing and just what the system needs. Just like church, just like life. Keep participating, keep tending, keep dancing, keep living into that living system. Through all of the ugliness, we have faith that beauty and life-giving powers will emerge. So may it be. Amen.